The stage looks holy, the words sound pure, but behind the curtain, power, money and influence, the kind of wealth that rivals celebrities, yet comes wrapped in the language of faith. These are the richest female pastors rivaling even Elon Musk. A story not just about money, but about what money means when it's earned in the name of God. Stick with me until the very end, because what you're about to discover will leave you utterly speechless. Taffy Dollar, the partner in the shadows. They know her as the co-pastor, the woman who stands beside Creflo Dollar at World Changers Church International. But the name Taffy Dollar carries its own weight, a quiet empire of books, conferences, and a movement that reaches far beyond the pulpit. She preaches about equality, she champions women's voices in faith, and she leads a ministry dedicated to breaking chains that religion itself once forged. But while her message calls for freedom, critics point to the same paradox that follows her husband, a life surrounded by luxury, funded by faith. Therefore, the name Dollar has become both a banner of blessing and a lightning rod of controversy. Her estimated net worth is said to hover in the millions, not on the level of televangelist empires, but enough to mark her as one of the wealthiest women preachers alive. But what does that wealth mean in a church where sacrifice is preached? Therefore, her story forces the same haunting question: when pastors prosper, are they proof of God's favor or proof of man's excess? And here's the twist most don't see. Taffy isn't just the quiet partner. She is the founder of her own women's ministry, a voice demanding gender balance in church leadership, and a speaker who confronts long-standing taboos in Christian communities. But that independence also raises the stakes. She's not just sharing her husband's spotlight, she's building a stage of her own. Therefore, her fortune becomes a symbol, not just of prosperity preaching, but of how women in ministry can wield power in ways once unthinkable. So the paradox deepens. Taffy Dollar, an advocate of freedom, a voice for equality, and yet a name forever tied to wealth, scrutiny, and the question no preacher can fully escape. How much is too much? And if you think her life is complex, wait until you meet the next name. She isn't just a preacher. She's a singer, a prophet, and a woman whose rise to power was as dramatic as her public collapse. Juanita Bynum, the prophet and the fall. She was once hailed as the most powerful woman in the pulpit. Her sermons shook stadiums, her voice filled arenas, her words were called prophetic, her presence magnetic. Juanita Bynum wasn't just a pastor, she was a phenomenon. Her rise seemed unstoppable. From gospel albums to best-selling books, from fiery conferences to worldwide recognition, she built a reputation as the voice of revival for a new generation. But the higher she climbed, the harder the ground waited below. Therefore, when the fall came, it came in public. Her marriage to Bishop Thomas Weeks became headline news, not for love, but for violence. The brutal altercation in an Atlanta parking lot shocked the faithful. The woman who preached healing was suddenly the face of pain, but instead of silence, Juanita spoke. She turned her scars into sermons, her heartbreak into testimony. Therefore, the world saw not just a victim, but a prophet who refused to disappear. Yet controversy never left her side. Financial struggles, failed ventures, and accusations of mismanagement followed her ministry. She declared bankruptcy, endured public ridicule, and saw the empire she built begin to crumble. But Juanita Bynum is nothing if not resilient. Even in the ashes, she reinvented herself, returning to the pulpit, the studio, and the stage. Therefore, her story became less about riches and more about survival. Her estimated fortune is said to remain in the millions, placing her among the wealthiest female pastors. But those millions tell only half the story. Therefore, Juanita's legacy is a paradox, a preacher who turned pain into prophecy, yet whose fortune and fame could never shield her from the storm. And so the chilling punchline remains. Her power was undeniable, her fall unforgettable, and her survival unexplainable. Juanita Bynum is proof that even prophets bleed. She is both a warning and a wonder, a reminder that even prophets walk through fire. But the story doesn't end with tragedy. The next name takes us into a different arena altogether. Because when faith walks hand in hand with political power, the stakes change. The sermons become strategy, and the pulpit becomes a platform that reaches all the way to the White House. Paula White, the pastor in the White House. She wasn't born into power, she wasn't raised with wealth. Paula White's beginnings were marked by struggle, a broken family, a childhood scarred by abuse, and a desperate search for meaning. But those wounds became fuel. Therefore, when she found the pulpit, she found her weapon. Her sermons were fiery, her charisma undeniable. She built a ministry that stretched across television screens and megachurch stages. Followers saw a prophetess. Critics saw a celebrity in disguise. But Paula White wasn't just chasing influence in the church. Therefore, she stepped into something even more dangerous: politics. She became known as the spiritual advisor to Donald Trump. Suddenly, her prayers were broadcast from the White House itself. She wasn't just a pastor anymore, she was a power broker. But with that power came firestorms of controversy, accusations of prosperity gospel preaching, claims of financial excess, and critics branding her a symbol of faith entangled with politics. Therefore, every prayer she spoke became both a message to heaven and a weapon in the battlefield of public opinion. Her estimated net worth is counted in the millions, not the highest among pastors, but enough to make her one of the richest female preachers in the world. But in Paula White's case, the real currency has never been money. Therefore, her wealth is measured in access, in connections, in the rare ability to move seamlessly between a pulpit and a presidential podium. And here lies the paradox: a pastor called to preach humility, standing at the side of one of the most powerful men in the world. Paula White is living proof that in modern America, faith isn't just spiritual, it's political. From the White House pulpit, we move to another stage, one not defined by politics but by raw prophetic fire. Cindy Trimm, the commander's voice. She doesn't just preach, she declares, she commands. Cindy Trimm is known as the General of Prayer, a leader whose words sound less like sermons and more like battle cries. Her journey began in Bermuda, far from the spotlight of American megachurches, but her voice carried across oceans. Therefore, she rose from local minister to global strategist, author, and empowerment icon. Her message is relentless: discipline, leadership, spiritual warfare. Followers say she awakens destiny. Critics say she weaponizes faith, but no one denies her influence. Therefore, her books became bestsellers, her conferences packed arenas, and her reputation grew as one of the sharpest female leaders in modern Christianity. Her estimated fortune sits in the millions, built on publishing, speaking tours, and her global brand. But Cindy Trimm doesn't wear her wealth like others on this list. Therefore, her power isn't in luxury displays, it's in the authority of her presence, the weight of her words, and the way leaders, politicians, and pastors alike seek her counsel. And here's the paradox: she preaches warfare, but her battlefield is the heart. She calls people to conquer not empires but themselves. Cindy Trimm's story isn't one of scandal or extravagance, it's one of discipline turned into empire. Cindy Trimm shows us power through discipline, but our next name shows us something very different: power through partnership and fame. Victoria Osteen, the First Lady of Lakewood. She isn't just a pastor's wife, she's a pastor in her own right. Victoria Osteen, co-leader of Lakewood Church in Houston, stands beside Joel Osteen, one of the most famous preachers in the world. But make no mistake, Victoria has her own story, her own voice, her own following. Her rise came quietly, almost seamlessly, as she moved from the background to the pulpit. But once she stepped forward, she never stepped back. Therefore, she became the First Lady of Lakewood, speaking to millions through broadcasts, books, and conferences. Her estimated fortune is in the millions, a wealth drawn from Lakewood's global reach, book deals, and speaking tours. But wealth has its shadows. Critics argue that Lakewood's prosperity gospel message glorifies abundance while glossing over sacrifice. Therefore, Victoria Osteen became both admired for her positivity and accused of promoting a gospel too comfortable for its own good. And then came a scandal that made headlines, an airline confrontation in 2005 that ended with a lawsuit and public scrutiny. The woman who preached peace was suddenly portrayed as a symbol of privilege, but the case faded and her influence endured. Therefore, Victoria proved that even controversy couldn't derail a brand as strong as Lakewood. Here lies the paradox. She is celebrated as a voice of encouragement, a symbol of faith and family. Yet, her fortune and fame raise the same haunting question as the others. Is this inspiration, or is it industry? From Houston's brightest stage, we move to the final name on our list. A woman whose empire dwarfs them all, and whose fortune makes her the wealthiest female pastor alive. Joyce Meyer, the voice through the storm. She's not just a preacher, she's a brand. Her voice echoes across continents, her books fill shelves worldwide, and her sermons reach millions every day. Joyce Meyer isn't only the richest female pastor in the world, she's also one of the most polarizing. Her story begins not in luxury, but in torment. A childhood scarred by abuse, a father whose return from war left wounds no child should carry. But what should have silenced her became the seed of her calling. Therefore, Joyce turned her pain into a message, her scars into sermons, and her survival into proof that faith could heal the deepest wounds. From small Bible studies to international broadcasts, she built Joyce Meyer Ministries. Her program, Enjoying Everyday Life, became a global powerhouse. But with global reach came global scrutiny. Therefore, the woman known for teaching about emotional restoration found herself at the center of financial controversy. Reports surfaced of multi-million-dollar homes, luxury furnishings, and even private jets. To her followers, these were blessings, proof that God rewards the faithful. But to her critics, they were symbols of excess, evidence of prosperity gospel gone too far. Therefore, Joyce Meyer became the paradox personified, a healer to some, a hypocrite to others. And then came 2025, a shock decision. Joyce Meyer suddenly pulled her program from Daystar, one of the largest Christian networks, citing allegations of abuse cover-ups within the organization. Her son's message was clear: they had a responsibility to stand for truth. But in walking away, she risked influence, audience, revenue. Therefore, even at the peak of her career, Joyce Meyer proved she was willing to lose the stage rather than lose her integrity. Her fortune, estimated at nearly $8 million, crowns her the wealthiest female pastor alive. But numbers alone don't tell her story. Therefore, her legacy is measured not just in dollars, but in the millions who say her voice kept them alive. And here's the chilling paradox. Joyce Meyer's greatest sermon may not be the words she speaks on stage, but the life she lives in the tension between wealth and faith, pain and healing, sacrifice and abundance. 6 pastors, 6 fortunes, 6 paradoxes of faith and wealth. They inspire millions, yet stir endless debate. So tell me, are they living proof of God's blessing or of man's ambition? Stick with me, because one more story is coming, and it may be the most shocking of them all.